All Imani Rivers wanted was to help her mother get the medicine drive home safely, no trouble. But a white officer pulled her over, mocked her for saying her dad was in special forces, then cuffed her on the sidewalk like a criminal. She didn't lie. She didn't fight. She just waited until the man they mocked stepped out in uniform and changed everything. What do you do when the system laughs at the truth, then has to kneel before it? Tap, like if you believe dignity matters. Let's rewind and watch how it all unfolded. Clearbrook wasn't the kind of town where big things happened. The streets were quiet, the people polite, and, if anything did stir it, usually had to do with high school football or the Friday farmers market. But that afternoon, something different was brewing. And it all started with a girl named Imani Rivers. She was 17, smart, quiet. The kind of kid who kept her head down, did her homework, and never caused a ripple in the pond. She lived with her parents in a little blue house just past Pine Street, the kind with chipped paint on the porch and a wind chime that never stopped spinning. But lately, things had been harder than usual. Her mother, Charlene, had just come home from spinal surgery. The pain was worse than expected, and even the smallest movement sent jolts up her back. She couldn't walk, couldn't stand, couldn't do much more than whisper for her next dose of medication. And her father, Marcus Rivers, a master sergeant in the U.S. Army Special Forces, had only returned from deployment a week ago, 14 months overseas. But duty called again. This time not to war, but to meetings, briefings, debriefings. He hadn't even had time to breathe, let alone catch up with his daughter. So that afternoon, when Charlene gritted her teeth through a fresh wave of pain and whispered, "Baby, we're out of meds," Imani didn't hesitate. She could have waited, could have called someone, but the closest family lived 3 hours away. The neighbors were all working, and her father, he wouldn't be home until after 6. So she took the keys. The car was nothing fancy. An old silver sedan with a cracked dashboard and a dent on the driver's side door, but it ran smooth, and she knew it well. Imani only had her learner's permit, and she knew the law, knew she wasn't supposed to drive alone. But what do you do when your mother's in pain, the house is silent, and no one else is coming? You step up. She grabbed her wallet, double-checked her learner's permit, and left a note on the kitchen table. "Mom, I'll be back in 20. Love you." There was no dramatics, no trembling goodbye, just quiet determination. As she backed out of the driveway, she remembered what her father always said when they practiced driving in that same car. Smooth on the gas, know your mirrors, and never ever let fear take the wheel. It echoed now as her hands gripped 10 and 2. Her eyes flicked to every mirror, scanned every sign. Not too fast, not too slow. Turn signals, stop lines, check the speed, breathe. She wasn't scared of driving. She was scared of being seen. Imani had grown up knowing what it meant to be seen a certain way. A young black girl, alone, in an old car, behind the wheel without an adult. It didn't matter that her father had a chest full of medals or that her mom had worked as a nurse for 20 years. Out there, she knew what she looked like. Still, she kept going. 1 block, then another. The drugstore was only 10 minutes away and she'd planned every turn. No back roads, no stops, just straight there and back. But as she turned onto Maple Street, the final stretch before the store, she saw something that made her stomach drop. Flashing red and blue lights. At first she thought they were passing by. She eased up on the gas, kept her hands steady and whispered to herself, "You're fine. You didn't do anything wrong." Then the siren chirped. Short, sharp, directly behind her. Her breath caught. No, no, no. She checked her speed. It was legal. Her signal on. Everything was in place. But the lights didn't leave. They stayed right behind her, close, demanding. Imani's hands trembled as she turned on her signal and carefully pulled over to the side. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears. She did everything her parents had ever told her, rolled down the window, kept her hands on the wheel, eyes forward, mouth shut, respectful, calm, but inside she was spiraling. Her mother was in pain. Her father didn't even know she'd left, and now she was sitting in a parked car alone with a police cruiser behind her and no way to explain that she wasn't just another kid out joyriding. She was just trying to help. Outside, the town kept moving. Birds chirped, dogs barked. A school bus rumbled by with kids pressing their faces to the glass. But in that car on that street, everything had gone still. And as the officer's door creaked open and heavy footsteps approached her window, Imani gripped the wheel tighter, took a breath, and braced herself for whatever came next. The tires were still warm. The engine hummed low. And as the sun beat down on Maple Street, Imani Rivers stared straight ahead, driven not by rebellion or carelessness, but by love, and a choice she should have never had to make alone. The sound of boots crunching on asphalt reached Imani before she even saw him. She stared straight ahead, both hands still locked on the steering wheel, just like her parents had taught her. Don't reach. Don't talk first. Don't make sudden moves. Wait. The officer's shadow fell across the window. Then a firm rap, 2 sharp knocks against the glass. She looked up. White. Mid-40s. Stocky frame. Square jaw. His uniform was neat, but his face told another story. Tired eyes, clenched jaw, and a kind of hardened stillness that didn't feel safe. His name tag read, Dalton. He didn't smile. License and registration, he said flatly. Not even a hello. Imani swallowed and nodded, voice shaking slightly. Yes, sir. I have my learner's permit. She handed it out with careful fingers. I was just trying to... You driving alone? She hesitated. Yes, sir. My mom. She's really sick. She just had surgery and... He leaned down, squinting. You know this ain't legal, right? I know. But I had to get her medicine. There was no one else to go. He ignored her tone, ignored her eyes, ignored everything but the paper in his hand. Step out of the car. Her heart dropped. Sir, I wasn't speeding. I didn't break any laws besides being alone. I swear I said step out of the vehicle. He repeated, his voice sharper now, his hand resting too casually on the holster at his side. Imani blinked hard, forcing back the tears burning behind her eyes. She unbuckled and stepped out slowly, hands visible at all times. Her knees felt like water. The sun hit her face, but all she felt was cold. Officer Dalton walked a slow circle around the car, inspecting it like it had something to confess. He stopped at the back bumper. Tail lights out, he called. Imani turned slightly, her voice still gentle. I didn't know that, sir. My mom usually drives. He marched back toward her, holding her permit. Driving alone. Faulty vehicle. That's 2 violations right there. Sir, please. She tried again. My mom just had back surgery. She can't move. She was crying in pain. I just needed to get her medication. Still nothing in his eyes. No sympathy. No mercy. I can call my dad. He'll explain everything. He just got back from deployment. Dalton cocked his head slightly. Deployment? Yes, sir. He's Special Forces. U.S. Army. He just got back last week. And then it happened. A short, dry laugh escaped his lips. He looked her up and down, 17 scared, standing on a sidewalk with her shoulders tense and voice trembling, and smirked. Special Forces, he repeated with a chuckle that wasn't friendly. Sure he is. Everyone's dad's a Navy SEAL or a Green Beret when they're in trouble. Imani's mouth opened, but nothing came out. That laugh, it cut deeper than the hand on the gun. It was the sound of someone who had already decided who you were before you even had a chance to prove otherwise. He shook his head and turned back to his patrol car. Stay right there. She watched him walk away, fingers still twitching from adrenaline. Her cheeks burned, not just from the sun, but from the heat of humiliation. She could feel the eyes now, drivers slowing down, heads turning, necks craning. A few kids in a passing school bus pressed their faces to the windows. Imani lowered her gaze. Her chest tightened. She hadn't done anything wrong. Not really. She wasn't joyriding. She wasn't running from anyone. She just wanted to help her mother. And now here she was, alone, embarrassed, and being treated like a liar. Because she was 17, because she was black, because the truth wasn't something people like him were ready to hear from someone like her. She reached slowly into her pocket and pulled out her phone, thumbs shaking. One text. To the one person she trusted more than anything. She typed, "Dad. I got pulled over. Maple Street. He doesn't believe me. Please come." She stared at the message for a second, then hit send, and exhaled. Because even though she was still standing in the heat on the side of the road, cuffless but cornered, she had just taken the first step toward changing everything. By the time Officer Dalton returned from his cruiser, something had changed in his posture. His jaw was tighter, the swagger more deliberate. He was holding a yellow citation pad in one hand, a long toe slip in the other. He slapped them both onto the hood of Imani's car. "I'm writing you up," he said bluntly. "Driving without a licensed adult. Operating an unsafe vehicle. And since you don't have a guardian present, your car's getting towed." Imani's voice wavered. "Sir, please. My dad is on his way. I just texted him." Dalton narrowed his eyes. "You had your chance, sweetheart. Now sign this citation so I can be done with you." She didn't move. "I'm only 17, she said quietly. "I can't sign anything without a guardian." Dalton stepped closer. "If you don't sign, I can arrest you for non-compliance." Imani took a deep breath. Her knees were shaking again, but her voice this time stayed calm. "Then I won't sign." He blinked. And just like that, something flipped. Dalton shoved the citation pad under his arm, reached for his cuffs, and muttered, "You want to play grown-up? Fine. Let's play." The sound of the cuffs clicking open was louder than it should have been. It made heads turn, people walking dogs, folks watering lawns, a cyclist passing by. And then he grabbed her wrists. Rough. Uncalled for. Imani gasped. "Wait, sir." But he was already twisting her arm behind her back. "You're under arrest for obstruction and failure to comply," he said mechanically, as if he'd rehearsed it for moments like this. A car door slammed somewhere nearby. "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" The voice was sharp, feminine, furious. Dalton froze, but only for a second. A young black woman in a gray hoodie was storming toward them, phone already out, live stream open. She was holding it high, camera angled right at his face. It was Maya Green, a junior at the State University, and an old friend of Imani's from debate club. She had been driving home from class when she saw the flashing lights and recognized that silver car. "Officer," she said, loud enough for the camera. "Why are you handcuffing a 17-year-old girl on the street? Did she assault someone, rob a store, or was she just trying to help her sick mother?" Dalton stiffened. "Back up, ma'am. This doesn't concern you." "It absolutely does," Maya fired back. "I'm a law student. Imani has the right not to sign that citation without a guardian, and you're escalating this on camera. So go ahead. Say what she did again." Imani stood still, cuffs biting into her wrists, tears threatening, but still she didn't cry. Not the way people expected. Her chest rose, fell. Her head stayed high. Maya's livestream comments began exploding. "Is this for real? Where is this happening? Tag ACLU. Tag everyone. #Justice for Imani. Let's go." Someone on a porch started recording too. Another passerby pulled over, holding up their phone. And then, out of nowhere, an elderly white woman stepped forward from across the street. Hair white as snow, glasses sliding down her nose. She looked like someone's retired librarian. Her voice was quiet but unwavering. "She reminded me of my granddaughter," she said. She was calm, respectful. She didn't look like a criminal. She just looked like someone trying to help her mom. Dalton didn't respond. Couldn't, maybe. The street had gone silent except for the buzzing of phones and the occasional ping of a new viewer joining Maya's stream. By now, over 800 people were watching. Imani's eyes filled, but she still didn't break. She could feel the sweat on her temples, the pressure of the cuffs, the heat of the sun on her neck. And yet, she didn't scream, didn't beg, didn't curse. She just stood there breathing through the weight of it all, her dignity, like a thread she refused to let go of. Maya moved closer, voice still rolling. "You gonna tell the world this is standard procedure?" "Officer Dalton. You gonna explain how a 17-year-old ends up in handcuffs over a bottle of medication?" Dalton's face twitched, but he didn't answer. He just looked at Imani, then at the phones, then stepped back. He didn't uncuff her, but he stepped back. The tension in the air was thick like thunder waiting to snap. And through it all, Imani stood there. Not as a criminal, not as a child, but as someone who for the first time wasn't just surviving it, but witnessed. And somewhere, a phone buzzed. Because the man she'd texted, he had read her message, and he was already on his way. The cuffs had started to bite into Imani's wrists. She stood quiet, her back straight, eyes staring down at the asphalt, like it could somehow ground her through it all. Across the hood, Officer Dalton sat in his cruiser typing something into the computer. His door was open. The radio crackled. He didn't look at her. That was her chance. With slow, measured movements hidden by the angle of the car, Imani shifted her weight just enough to reach her phone. It was still in her back pocket. Thank God. She curled her fingers around it and pulled it free, thumbs trembling but precise. One message. Nothing more. "Dad. Cuffed on Maple Street. Mom needs meds. Please." She hit send, then slipped the phone back like nothing happened, and waited. Half a mile away, in a modest tan brick house, tucked behind a row of elms, Marcus Rivers stood barefoot in the kitchen pouring coffee into a heavy ceramic mug. His uniform, deep green with sharp creases, still fit him like a second skin even after 14 months in the desert. He'd just finished his morning debrief at base. He hadn't even taken the boots off yet. The house was quiet. Charlene was sleeping upstairs finally at peace after a long night of pain. For once, Marcus had allowed himself to exhale. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced down mid-sip, saw the name, Imani, and then the message. Cuffed. Maple Street. Mom needs meds. Please. He didn't move at first, just stood there. Then the mug slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. Coffee sprayed across the tiles, but he didn't even look down. In one swift motion, Marcus grabbed his beret from the counter, snatched his military ID from the side table, and crossed the room. He didn't run. He didn't panic. He moved like a man trained for crisis, like someone who had kicked down doors in countries most Americans couldn't point to on a map. He got into his SUV, turned the ignition, and pulled his Bluetooth earpiece from the dash. One button, one contact. "Colonel Hart," he said the moment the line picked up. "This is Rivers. I need to report an active incident involving my daughter. Civilian police. Clearbrook. I need you to monitor and escalate as needed." The voice on the other end didn't hesitate. "Understood. Confirming location now." Marcus hung up. His jaw clenched. His fingers tightened on the wheel. He didn't yell, didn't scream. But in his silence was a storm. Back on Maple Street, Maya was still live streaming. The comment section was now moving too fast to read. Thousands were watching. Dozens had tagged advocacy groups, news outlets, civil rights lawyers. Imani stood still, waiting. Dalton stepped out of his cruiser again, sunglasses now on, holding a printout from the patrol system. He muttered something under his breath and approached her. "I ran your record," he said flatly. "Looks clean, but that doesn't change the law. You drove illegally. You refused to comply." She didn't reply. He looked around at the phones pointed at him. For a split second, something in his posture twitched, like maybe just Maybe the pressure was getting to him, but he straightened back up. Ambulances and stories don't change facts, he said almost to himself. He reached out ready to tighten the cuffs, and then a deep voice rang out from across the street. "Officer, step away from my daughter." Dalton turned annoyed and froze. Standing by the curb was a tall black man in a pressed Special Forces uniform, boots dusted with sand beret in hand. His badge was visible. So was his name tag. M. Rivers. The street went dead silent. Phones turned, cameras zoomed in, and in that moment, the very air seemed to shift. The dark SUV pulled up so quietly, no one noticed it at first. It rolled to a stop just past the police cruiser, its engine humming low, precise, controlled like everything else about the man behind the wheel. The door opened, and out stepped Master Sergeant Marcus Rivers. The boots hit the pavement first, steady, deliberate. Then came the rest of him, 6 feet of quiet authority, wrapped in a crisp, decorated U.S. Army Special Forces uniform. A row of service ribbons lined his chest. The green beret rested in his hand. A thick scar traced the edge of his wrist, earned, not given. He didn't move fast. He didn't need to. His presence alone slowed the air. Phones turned toward him. A few people gasped. Even Maya's live stream tilted, catching the sudden hush that fell like a sheet over Maple Street. Dalton noticed him last. The officer's posture stiffened. It was subtle but real, like a reflex drilled into him years ago. Shoulders squared, spine straight, a hint of a nod almost involuntary. Military habit dies hard. Marcus didn't acknowledge it. He walked right past Dalton, didn't say a word, just moved through the space like it belonged to him. And maybe in that moment, it did. He reached Imani. She hadn't moved. Her wrists were still cuffed, her eyes locked forward. But when she saw him, her shoulders trembled, then eased. Marcus looked at her first. Only her. "You okay, baby girl?" he asked softly. Imani swallowed. Her voice cracked. "I didn't sign Dad. I told him about Mom. He didn't listen." Marcus gave the smallest nod, almost imperceptible. "You did right." Then finally, he turned, faced Dalton, and the silence stretched like a wire pulled tight. Marcus's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "Uncuff her. Now." Dalton blinked. "Sir, She was non-compliant. She refused to sign a citation. "Uncuff her." It wasn't a request. It was an order. Calm, precise, command-layered. Dalton hesitated. His hand hovered near his belt, not on his weapon, but on the keys. Maya moved closer. Live stream still rolling. The comments were erupting. "Whoa, way, that's her dad. Bro looks like he runs the Pentagon." He didn't yell. He didn't blink. He just owned the moment. Dalton shifted his weight, eyes flicking to the cameras, the phones, the gathering crowd. His tongue clicked against the roof of his mouth. "Name and rank, sir," he asked tightly, still clinging to what was left of his authority. Marcus stepped forward just enough to close the space, not to intimidate, but to fill it. "Master Sergeant Marcus Rivers," he said. "U.S. Army Special Forces, 5th Group, active duty. Deployment completed 7 days ago." Dalton's mouth opened, closed. He looked at Imani again, then back at the medals, the service badge, the beret. Then he reached for the key. The click of the cuffs unlocking felt louder than it should have been. It rang in the air. Imani exhaled. Marcus didn't even look at Dalton again. He stepped behind his daughter gently, helped her rub her wrists, then took off his beret and placed it in her hands. "Hold this," he said softly. She looked up at him for the first time all day, really looked up. And for the first time, she wasn't holding back tears. She wasn't afraid anymore. Across the street, someone whispered, "It's like the air changed." Even the white lady from earlier wiped her glasses. I knew that girl came from somewhere strong. and in the breeze that rolled down Maple Street, Imani stood tall, her father beside her. No longer the girl in cuffs. Now the daughter of a man the system didn't dare laugh at. Not anymore. The cuffs were off. But the damage, that didn't just vanish. Imani stood quietly beside her father. Her wrists still carried the red marks of humiliation, but her eyes, they were steadier now, sharper. Marcus stood next to her, not blocking her, not shielding her, just with her. He turned slowly toward Officer Rick Dalton. "You laughed at my daughter," Marcus said, voice calm as stone. "You mocked her truth." Dalton stiffened. "I've heard that line from a dozen kids," he muttered, still holding the ticket book like a shield. "They all say it." Imani stepped forward, chin lifted. Her voice didn't tremble. It didn't have to. Maybe they all had parents worth believing. The line hit like a pin dropped in a courtroom. Someone in the crowd gasped. And then came the slow ripple of applause, soft at first, like people testing the silence. Then stronger, steady, supportive. Phones were raised again. The live stream viewer count ticked past 100,000. Comments poured in. She didn't flinch. He laughed at the wrong girl. "This is what dignity looks like." Dalton glanced around at the phones at the people watching, and something shifted behind his eyes. His grip on the ticket loosened. Then came a new voice, softer, younger. "Sir." A young officer barely older than Imani stepped closer to Dalton and spoke low, but the mic on a nearby phone caught it all. "I ran her ID. She's Marcus Rivers's daughter, Special Forces 5th Group." She wasn't lying. Dalton didn't respond right away. His eyes went from the rookie to Marcus to Imani. He looked at her differently now, not like a teenager behind the wheel, not like a problem, but like a person. Still silence hung thick. No apology, no excuse. Just tension raw and cold. Marcus didn't press. He let the moment sit because sometimes silence says more than shouting ever could. Then he asked, not loud, but with gravity that pulled the whole block into stillness. "Do you know what it takes for a girl to trust someone with her fear?" Dalton blinked. His mouth parted slightly, but no words came. Marcus's voice stayed low, but each word carried weight. "She was scared. She was alone. And she still gave you the truth. My daughter gave you the truth." He paused. "And you laughed." The crowd was silent now. Even the comment section of the live stream stilled. No emojis, no fire icons, no anger. Just people watching, letting it sink in. Dalton didn't argue. He didn't step forward or bark back. His shoulders dropped just slightly, the smallest surrender. Not one the badge taught him. But the kind life teaches you, when you realize you've been the wrong kind of loud. Imani didn't speak again. She didn't need to. She stood with her head high, and this time the wind didn't sting her eyes. It caught her curls and lifted them gently, like even the breeze knew who she was. For a long second, no one moved. Then an older woman in the crowd, the same one who had spoken up earlier, whispered just loud enough to be heard. She reminded me of my granddaughter, that was all. But it meant everything. The crowd wasn't dispersing. If anything, it was growing, like people had felt something crack open, and now they couldn't look away. Maya was still holding her phone up, hands steady, despite the adrenaline. Her voice trembled a little, but it was fierce underneath. "Y'all, the stream just got reposted by Senator Lawson," she announced, eyes wide. "Senator Lawson. He's calling for an investigation, right now." Gasps rippled. People turned to each other, some shocked, others nodding like they'd known this moment was coming. The tension on Maple Street had just leapt beyond city lines. Across the screen of Maya's phone, a new notification popped, #JusticeForImani is now trending nationwide. In that same breath, a group of high school students came jogging from around the corner, backpacks, bouncing shoes, scraping the sidewalk. "She's our class president nominee," one of them shouted, pointing proudly at Imani. Another boy chimed in, panting between words. We've been handing out flyers all week. Imani's the one who started the clean water petition for East Clearbrook. She's the one who made the school listen to us, a girl added, voice cracking. They weren't just defending a classmate. They were defending a leader. And suddenly, this wasn't just a cop versus a girl anymore. It was a town rallying around the dignity that had just been cuffed on the sidewalk. Rick Dalton stood in the center of it all, arms still stiff, lips pressed into a line. He glanced to his left. 2 officers stood behind the crowd, now watching. To his right, even the rookie who had backed him minutes earlier took a slow step away. No one said it out loud, but it was clear. He was alone. Imani wasn't looking at him anymore. She stood with her classmates' hands free, posture steady. But her heart still thudded hard behind her ribs. She hadn't done anything. But everything felt like too much. Rick shifted on his feet, still gripping the ticket book like it might shield him from what was happening. That's when Marcus walked forward again, not looming, not threatening, just steady. His voice was calm, but it struck like thunder wrapped in silk. Trust isn't given, he said, eyes locked on Rick. It's earned, and you lost it today. Rick didn't argue, didn't defend himself, because what do you say when a whole street and now a whole state is watching you finally see the consequences of dismissing someone's truth? Someone cleared their throat nearby, an older man in a flannel jacket. I served, he said, stepping forward. I did 2 tours in Fallujah. That girl just handled herself with more honor than I've seen in any courtroom. Then another voice, a nurse from the clinic across the street, called out. She came here last month with her mom. She's been carrying the weight of that whole house. Y'all don't even know what she's been through. It was like one voice unlocked the next. Testimonies poured in, one after another. People who knew her. People who'd only heard of her. People who just saw enough in her face to recognize something worth protecting. Marcus turned to Imani, speaking just to her this time. You all right? She nodded, tears at the edges of her lashes, not from fear anymore, from release, from the strange, overwhelming power of being seen. I didn't cry, she whispered. Marcus smiled faintly. You didn't have to. The live stream viewer count hit 300,000. Back at the department, a dispatcher was already fielding calls, reporters, city officials, watchdog groups, even a request from the mayor's office. Everything was moving fast, and for the first time in a long while, Clearbrook wasn't quiet. Imani took a breath. Not the shallow kind you take when you're nervous, the kind you take when something shifts and you realize the fear that held your lungs tight isn't holding you anymore. And still Rick said nothing. But the silence around him was no longer polite. It was accounting. And everyone was watching. The crowd had finally started to drift. Phones lowered. Whispers quieted. The fire of outrage slowly replaced by the weight of reflection. Marcus stood beside his daughter, gently resting a hand on her shoulder. Then without a word, he turned, walked toward Officer Rick Dalton, and stopped just close enough to be heard. You got a minute? He asked. Dalton blinked, swallowed, then nodded. Marcus led him across the street, away from the crowd, away from the noise, to a patch of grass under a wide old sycamore. The shade was cool calm, neutral ground. They stood in silence for a beat. Rick was the first to speak. I had a brother, he said, voice quieter now. Younger than me. Joined the Marines at 19. Wanted to serve like I did. Marcus didn't interrupt. Rick stared off, eyes unfocused. He came back different. Not just the usual stuff. He got caught up in a misunderstanding at a gas station. Thought someone was reaching for a gun. Turned out it was a wallet. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he stayed still. Rick went on. The media tore him apart. Lost his clearance. Lost his house. He couldn't handle it. Took his own life 5 months later. Silence again. Then Marcus asked quietly, "Then why'd you make my daughter feel that same pain?" Rick looked down, like the words hit lower than he was ready for. "I don't know," he said. "I saw a kid alone in a car. No plates, black, nervous. And all I thought was, here we go again. Not, what does she need?" Marcus asked. "No." Rick shook his head. "I didn't see her. I saw every mistake I was trained to expect." Marcus exhaled through his nose. "So you punished her for your fear?" Rick's voice cracked. "Guess I did." He shifted on his feet. "After my brother, I thought I'd be the one who understood. I thought I'd be different from the guys who took him down." He paused. "And then I became one of them." Marcus looked at him long and hard. Not with hate, not even judgment, just truth. "You know, Rick," he said slowly, "we don't get to choose how the world sees us, but we do choose how we see the people in front of us." Rick nodded, eyes still low. "You ever wonder how many kids you cuffed for things they didn't do?" Marcus asked. Rick didn't answer. He didn't have to. The pause said everything. "Imani," Marcus went on. "She's 17. 17. And still when you mocked her, she didn't fight. She didn't scream. She stood in her truth and waited." Rick's eyes glistened. "She didn't cry," he whispered. Marcus tilted his head. "Because she's been trained, not for war like me, but for living in a world that doubts her before it knows her name." Another pause. Longer. He continued softer now. "You know what I taught her about people like you?" Rick glanced up. "I told her that even good men can carry broken thinking, and they may never see it until it breaks someone they love." Rick looked away, jaw twitching. A bird chirped above like the world didn't realize it had just cracked open for him. "I don't hate you, Rick," Marcus said, "but I need you to see the line you crossed, not because it embarrassed you, but because it might have broken her." Finally, Rick whispered, "I'm sorry." And Marcus just nodded. "Good," he said. "Now don't just be sorry, be better." They didn't shake hands, didn't hug. This wasn't a movie ending. It was two men standing under a tree, one scarred by the past, one still learning from it. And that was enough. Back across the street, Imani watched from a distance. Maya stood beside her. "What do you think they're saying?" Maya asked. Imani didn't answer right away. She just looked at the two men under the shade. Then softly said, something he probably should have heard a long time ago. The crowd stood still. Not because someone told them to, but because something rare was happening. Officer Rick Dalton stepped forward, his steps slower than before, like gravity had increased on his boots. His radio was off. His hat was gone. And in his eyes, not defiance, but a quiet storm. He looked at Imani. "I was wrong," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "I judged too fast. I didn't listen. I'm sorry, Imani." The moment didn't crackle like a movie scene. There was no dramatic music, just wind and truth. Imani stared at him, not with anger, not with fear, with clarity. She stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "I accept your apology," she said, "but I will not stay silent again. Not for me, not for others." A murmur ran through the bystanders. Someone whispered, "That girl just changed this whole town." Across the street, Maya lowered her phone, her live stream still running. The comments were exploding. Imani speaks. Tash, the truth wears no uniform. Then came the voice of Chief Ramirez standing tall behind the line of officers. She held up a folder, eyes sharp. "Officer Dalton is hereby placed on administrative leave effective immediately pending internal review. The department will cooperate fully with oversight. Rick nodded, slowly, quietly, and didn't argue. Imani looked down, unsure of what to do with her hands, until someone stepped out from the crowd. It was Mrs. Langford, the elderly white woman who had spoken earlier. She walked up, took Imani's hand gently, and said, "You reminded me of strength I'd forgotten existed." A few reporters stepped in. One asked Imani, "Do you have a message for others watching?" Imani blinked, took a breath, and said, "The truth wears no uniform, and I'll keep speaking it, even if no one listens at first." And that was it. No podium, no cue cards, just truth. A call came over the police scanner, then another, but nobody moved. Finally, Marcus approached the officers who had been watching silently. "We don't need vengeance," he said. "We need better men in uniform." A few nodded. Others looked away. But something had shifted. 20 minutes later, the charges against Imani were dropped. No ticket, no court date, no record. But more importantly, no silence. As the sun dipped lower behind the rooftops of Clearbrook, a voice once dismissed became the voice everyone leaned in to hear. She didn't raise her voice to make noise. She raised it to make change. And in that quiet space, where the system had tried to break her, Imani stood tall. She didn't just survive the moment. She transformed it. The front door creaked open. It was past 6 p.m., and the light spilling through the curtains was soft and golden. The kind of light that makes everything pain joy, even silence, feel sacred. Imani stepped in first. Her shoulders still tense, her eyes still wide. Behind her came Marcus Boots, quiet on the hardwood floor, and a dignity in his stance that didn't need words. From the couch, Charlene Rivers, thin, pale, recovering, sat up with the help of her walker. Her face was streaked with fresh tears. A tablet sat on her lap screen, still glowing with the live stream that had just ended minutes before. She didn't speak at first. She just opened her arms. Imani rushed to her, dropped to her knees, and rested her head on her mother's lap, like she had when she was 5, scraped up from a fall. This time the wound was invisible, but no less deep. Charlene stroked her daughter's hair gently. "You didn't just protect me today," she whispered. "You protected yourself, and every girl who looks like you." Marcus leaned against the doorframe, watching his family in silence. His fingers were still curled from where they'd been clenched too long. Slowly, he stepped outside. In the front yard, the flower bed lay half-ruined. Mud had dried around broken roots and crushed petals trampled in the rush of morning. He knelt, dug his hands into the soil, gently pulled the old plants free, and began to replant them one by one. Imani joined him a few minutes later, still wearing the same jeans that had touched the sidewalk in handcuffs. She didn't speak, just handed him a fresh watering can. They didn't say it, but they both knew this was more than gardening. This was healing. Back inside, Imani's phone buzzed. A message from her school. "You've been voted into student council. Landslide." Imani blinked, then laughed. A real, breathless laugh that hadn't been in her since the day began. A moment later, another buzz. "Maya, let's do it. That forum we talked about, justice and youth voices. Let's make it real." Imani tapped back. "Let's build something better." As the sky dimmed, the three of them, Imani, Marcus, and Charlene, sat on the porch. No words, just rocking chairs creaking softly against the wood. The wind smelled like soil and lavender. Charlene finally broke the quiet. "People will come for your voice now, Imani. Some to uplift it, some to silence it. You ready?" Imani nodded. Not quickly, but with full weight. "I don't need everyone to believe me," she said. "Just enough to build something that lasts." Marcus stood, brushed his hands, and looked out toward the quiet road where everything had happened just hours ago. "You know," he said, eyes still forward, "some people wait a whole lifetime to figure out who they are, what they're meant to do." He turned to Imani. But the world doesn't need more fighters right now. It needs bridge builders. And today, one just found her voice. Imani didn't reply. She didn't need to. The world had already heard her. And this time no one was laughing. Sometimes all it takes is one voice, calm, steady, and true, to remind the world what dignity looks like. Imani didn't fight with fists. She stood her ground with truth, grace, and courage. And because of that, a whole town took a breath and listened. This story wasn't just about injustice. It was about healing, about second chances, and about the quiet power of those who choose to build bridges when they could have burned them. If this story moved you, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Mr. Mac's Stories for more powerful stories that shine a light on truth, justice, and the human spirit. Your support isn't just numbers to us, it's the fuel that keeps our storytelling alive. Every click, every share, every new subscriber helps us tell the next story better. Because here at Mr. Mac's Stories, we don't just tell stories, we remember them, and we make sure the world does too. See you in the next one.